All right, guys, in just a couple minutes, we are going to dive in with Jocelyn Sheltraw. She is the founder and CEO of Budist, and that is what I like to call today's Yelp for the cannabis space. It was just recently founded by her and her husband, so they're a major power couple in the space. And they were actually part of a huge deal that took place at the state fair this year, and we're going to jump all into that in this episode. All right, we have Miss Jocelyn on. Thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you.
Hi, Casey. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Yeah, just super grateful you came on today. I know that I have kind of crossed your path for a couple years now, and people have highly just referred me to everything that you've done, and just like, watch Jocelyn. She is a powerhouse to be around. And so I took their advice, and since then I'm like, wow, this is somebody that I could definitely see myself around. Even everything about you and your husband speaks loud to me, and so I love that you're here today.
Oh, I love that. Right back at you, sister. You've been out there being loud and proud for a long time in our industry and just such an amazing representative for our community. So thank you for everything you contribute to our industry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's always, it's not an easy task, but I think we love it so much that it doesn't feel like a task. Glad to be here. Glad to be in this space. Let's dive into a little bit about who you are and what you've built so far. I know we are both out of California, but have you always been well, I guess you are kind of SoCal, NorCal. For me, I'm so in the Inland Empire that I feel I'm super SoCal. But yeah, tell us a little bit about where you're from.
Yes, I'm a California girl through and through. I was born in Long Beach, spent the first 8 years of my life in Long Beach before moving to Irvine. And that was really, kind of the formative years up until going to college and then living in LA for a bit before moving to San Francisco 12 years ago. So have always lived in California, but have traveled around a great deal in my life. And this is just my absolute favorite place to be. I feel so fortunate to be living in such a great state where we just have access to so many incredible things.
Yeah, that part, the access to so many incredible things like cannabis. I always have to remind myself the privilege that we have here in California. And it's not something that I run into often because I don't travel too often, but I know people like you have traveled everywhere internationally. And so you probably can speak to that a little bit more. But thank you for sharing that. Let's dive into a little bit of your background. I know me personally from following you. I think it was your ballet and your love for that art and dancing. I think you have a little bit of background on that. We also asked everybody to fill out a short kind of Q&A to get your background. And you had mentioned about daily walks being part of your wellness. We always preach movement is medicine for everybody. And especially in today's world, it's so important for me to be a fitness enthusiast that really preaches this in our space, because we have a stigma of being couch locked and lazy. I love to highlight this part. So tell us a little bit about how, your wellness takes place and if cannabis is part of that.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I've had different kind of transition to my own wellness routine, just, being a startup founder, and just things are so incredibly busy in my world. And so I no longer get to do I used to be really into Bikram ballet, as you mentioned, but now I'm just finding that it's walking the lake. I live on Lake Merritt in Oakland, and just being out in nature. And I walk every single day with my partner, Claudio. And that's where we just kind of debrief on our day and have the opportunity. The greatest ideas that I have happen on walks. And you just don't get that as much if you're doing something like Bikram or ballet or whatever it is, while equally as, impactful in my life. But just being able to just be out there, feet on the ground in nature, being on the water, walking with my partner, it's just unbelievable what that does for your mindset and just mental health. And so for me, especially being in this journey and, a startup in the cannabis industry during this particular time in our history in cannabis, there's a lot going on. And so just being able to have that kind of thing that keeps my mind clear, and it's imperative. It's imperative. So I walk every single day. I live a pretty healthy lifestyle. I'm pretty regimented in the things that I do. So I eat plant-based Sunday to Thursday. And then Friday, then it's like, that's my balance where it's like, okay, then it's on. I can kind of give myself that freedom to do whatever I want. But I just try to be as structured in my week as possible, just because I'm balancing so many different things. I think if I didn't have that structure, I don't think I would be able to function kind of at the level that I'm functioning right now.
Yeah, no, I could totally agree to all of that. I think having that discipline from, your dancing and in that world really just trickles into making sure that you're prepared mentally and physically for whatever you guys have coming up as a business owner, which we will dive into. The other thing I love about that is that you are with your partner and you guys are building this together. So the fact that you guys are walking together and kind of sharing that creative mindset together. I came across a podcast where a scientist was talking about even, daily walks in nature can even help our cell on a cellular level. And so I can completely resonate with the creative part of that. And I mean, even being specific about being barefoot and making sure your feet is like touching grass and something that's like connecting you to nature to enhance that. And so I love that you brought that up. I think I seen a recent post that you guys were like in the middle of the woods. I mean, you guys look so tiny. I think maybe redwoods, but just you had expressed your love and for him and just everything that you guys are building together. And so I know it's not easy building a business for one, and then to do it with your life partner. Can you touch a little bit about that? I mean, I know maybe people are
Totally.
hesitant to do it, or maybe you have some tips of why to do it.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's funny, most of our friends or industry colleagues, that's one of the questions that they ask. And there's a lot of curiosity around it because I think, to your point, for most people, that just would be really challenging to be with their partner 24/7. I mean, we work from home or we're on the road, but we're always together throughout our day. I think from the first time we met, we've been together a little over 4 years. And both of us, I've been in the industry for 7 years. Claudia's been in the industry for 10 plus years. And we met at a headset data night, actually, like
Very nice.
5 years ago,
Okay.
and just kind of hit it off and had one of those relationships that just went from 0 to 100 very quickly. And it just worked for us. And we started working together really early in our relationship, where we were teaching a cannabis course, and we still do at Start Say University, which is essentially like an MBA program for a bunch of entrepreneurs from Brazil that are trying to learn about new and emerging technologies. And so we developed a course together where we were teaching, all these entrepreneurs about all the different use cases of cannabis. And we started building that program out together 3 plus years ago. So just very early on from that experience, we knew that we would work very well together. And and like I said, like it's kind of funny. A lot of our friends make fun of us because we're truly together like 24/7. We even see the same hairstylist. And some people think that's weird, but it's like just the state of like our business and how much we're on the go. We're kind of in a period of our life where a lot of this is about efficiency at this point because we just have so little time. And
Yeah.
so it just, but fortunately it works for us. Like, I think because we have a very good balance of we're very similar individuals, but we each kind of have our own lanes that we're in, and we have a great amount of respect for each other. And just we share a very similar perspective on what it is that we want to build and things that are just naturally and inherent to who we are. We're just so aligned on that. So, fortunately for us, it's working incredibly well. Going through and like raising money and building our team, like that was definitely one of the questions that came up. But I think through time, people have just seen that our level of execution, how well we work together, we feel that we're the moat in our business. Like it's really the two of us that's bringing so much power to this in a sense because it's our whole life. I mean, we're working on this from 9 a.m. to seriously like 2 a.m. every night, and it's 7 days a week. And it doesn't feel like work because it's just something that it's just like a natural thing that we both feel so strongly within ourselves that it's just coming out in everything that we do.
I say it's your guys' baby. It's,
It
you're
truly.
something that you're taking care of, no matter what the day and time it is, whatever attention it needs. And the more your heart's into it and your intentions are right for why it exists, I think it makes everything's makes a lot more sense as to why there's late nights, I should say.
Yeah,
I love the
absolutely.
education program. I had no idea. And I know you said, is it specifically because somebody, either you or Claudio, have a Brazilian background? Is there why there was a target to is a Brazilian community?
Well, Claudia's actually Chilean, but no, it's, you know what, how this came about is really just a testament to the power of LinkedIn. I'd been sharing over the course of my career, especially with headset, and I came from tech. Like my world prior was working with mobile app developers for 10 years
Okay.
before coming into cannabis. And so I personally, and then growing up being a millennial, Facebook came out the year I graduated college. So I've been using social media like for my own personal brand to build business since graduating college. And just then with LinkedIn, I started using it very actively when it comes to like sharing all the data and the insights that we were learning at Headset. And then just learn through that, like, wow, if you are sharing authentically, if you are really putting yourself out there and providing value to people, just sharing things that are helpful, a lot of
Yeah.
opportunity comes from that. And so that is how that kicked off. Someone had been following me from that university, had reached out and said, I love everything you're sharing. This would be so helpful. We have this program that is teaching entrepreneurs about AI and all kinds of things that are coming out of Silicon Valley. And so then they had reached out saying, hey, can you help our students really understand the emerging trends in cannabis?
Is it translated in, is it Portuguese that their
Uh-huh.
dialect?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a translator there when we're doing it. And
Okay.
it's really interesting because in Brazil, cannabis is so stigmatized. It really ties back to religion. And I
Yep.
think that's something that we almost take for granted here in the United States, where we almost don't realize like how advanced we are and how progressive we are in our mindset around cannabis. And so it's funny because during these classes, we'll have, 50 to 75 students in them. And for the most part, nobody speaks English. So we have this translator. And when we start off the class, I always like to say, like, okay, let me ask you this, like, who's consumed cannabis before? Raise your hand.
So
And
scared.
most people start off the class, their arms are crossed, they're sitting back in their seats, just like, I don't know about this, like very like hesitant about what we're going to be
Yeah.
sharing. But then
Mhm.
by the end of the class, because we're going through all of the use cases, and a lot of people don't realize the industrial hemp use cases. They don't realize, they realize some of the medical aspects. But when
Right.
we start to get into a lot of the details there, by the end of the class, when I ask that question, like, hey, did this change your perspective of cannabis? It's across the board, smiling faces, hands are raised. It's a whole different environment. And so that's just really for us has been something like a light bulb moment of there is just so much stigma around this that if we come with an education forward approach, then
Mhm.
I think the data speaks for itself. And I think a lot of people will then understand, okay, the perception that I've had around this, maybe it's time for me to question that a little bit.
Right, right. I had to ask that question because I always tell people that it's interesting to hear the cultural side of things because my parents, my dad's from the Philippines, my mom is from El Salvador. My dad's totally chill with it, cool, knows about it, kind of dibble dabbled in it. My mom is still sees it as something related to the gangs and still part of the drug war that they experience in their country. And so when you're saying that this is an institute that was primarily for Brazilian students, I would say that's really interesting. And to have it, um, translated in their language is so important because that can also be a barrier in understanding the difference of hemp and the difference in cannabis, and all the different cannabinoids that we go through and are discussing now in our space, all the terpenes. And then all the different products and all the innovative stuff that's happening now is probably so much for them to take on. They don't know where to start. And so I love that you guys are reaching out and out of the space because I think that's where most of the impact is needed as far as education. So having conversations like this always excites me. The more we can put this out there in a lax way for other people to absorb it, I think is super important when it comes to education. So thank you for taking time to share this. The other thing that reminded me was I totally could not remember what you have spoken before at events, and I couldn't remember the background that you came from, which now when you said headset, totally started like bringing everything together. Um, Tech background, a little bit of that. What got you to go from I don't know if you were focused on that, but you could tell us from going to that industry to being what you're doing now, because to my understanding, you also became certified as a ganjier. Is that correct? I always say, I always butcher it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, a ganchier.
Ganjier, there you go. And I think that program is incredible, and what they're doing to make sure that everybody is able to talk about this plant the best that they can talk about it with that background. And, me being an Emerald Cup judge 3 times in a row, that has really elevated my knowledge as far as how to assess flower. And so let's talk a little bit how you went from tech to going through this journey and to now being the founder of Budist.
Yes. Okay. Well, for me, I graduated college in 2007. And if you think back to 2007, I often kind of reference this story where it's like that summer is when the iPhone came out, which is just
Mhm.
crazy to think about how much our worlds had changed since then. So here I am, fresh out of school, looking for a job. And the first jobs I got was for a mobile agency that was doing all these short code campaigns. So the campaigns like text this short code or this keyword to the short code and get opted into some rewards program. This was pre-apps even being built. And anyways, my point in that is so I started working with mobile developers like year one of the iPhone coming out. And then that industry just evolved so quickly. I mean, it's really remarkable. It's what, brought me up to San Francisco 12 years ago was to be a part of the birth of that whole industry. So here I was, this very young person, fresh out of school, and working on the agency side with all kinds of app developers. I've worked with probably several hundred apps from like Spotify to Uber to Pandora, and not just working with them, but seeing them be born and becoming friends with a lot of the founders of these companies. And so I just got to be a part of the birth of this new industry that forever changed our entire global society. And so I had started, and that was just so fun for me, just being, and I love a lot of change. I just love like startups. It's really all I know, having that been my primary experience. And
Mhm.
so just following, and I'm a longtime cannabis consumer. It's part of my, like, I grew up in cannabis culture. My parents are musicians and artists, and it's very much been a part of my DNA. And so I was always known in cannabis as the girl who, or in tech, as the girl who was coming with all the really good weed to all the tech parties. So I had that reputation. People knew I loved cannabis. And one of my colleagues was like, and I'd been eyeing the cannabis industry, watching it become medically legalized in California. And so I was kind of looking at from that frame of mind of seeing like, okay, I'm watching this evolve. This is going to be the next great global shift that we have outside of the mobile phone. And so that was initially my perspective. And then as such, things always manifest when you put it out, into the universe like that. And so one of my colleagues at the last tech company I was working at before coming into cannabis was like, hey, my neighbor is one of the founders of Leafly. And I was a huge Leafly fan, just again, being a longtime connoisseur. And I was like, no way. And he's like, yeah, he started this new data company called Headset. And so he introduced us. And then, next thing you know, I was coming on board at Headset as one of the earliest, employees there to really help go expand the company market to market. And it was just an incredible journey for me. It was really a testament of like all of the things I love coming together, where it's, technology and cannabis and opening up new markets and doing a lot of BD work and helping evangelize an industry. I did a lot of that when I was working in mobile, a lot of just like that kind of brand building, evangelizing a new technology. And so it just couldn't have been a more perfect fit for me personally, and the combination of all the things I love. And then meanwhile, what I didn't realize, and in tech, and especially in like San Francisco at that time, it's just like we experience in our industry where it's a very strong community. And so I had learned the power of community working in tech, but I didn't really realize how much like being passionate about the thing that you're really selling plays into the overall success. And I think with cannabis, because for me personally, it just touched my like spirit and my soul on such a different level than working with apps. And it just didn't have as much of that emotional connection for me. And so then just learning that like, wow, there's this whole group of people, there's this whole community that is a part of this because they're so passionate about the idea of it, the impact that it can have. I didn't have as much of that in mobile. It's like people were a part of that, or were so excited because these new ideas, but it wasn't connecting with people in the same way, where it's touching people in a medical reason or it's a spiritual reason. So I've just found that like being a part of this community and really being so passionate about the thing that it is you're helping build within that community, it can just it's required to really build something that's going to shift our society. You have to have both that passion for it, not just the visionary of what it can do for our society, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So well said. I feel personally that you did very well as far as still, you're not necessarily in the mobile tech world, but it's still kind of aligned into what you guys are doing, because Buddhist is one, just I feel like you guys are everywhere right now, possibly because you guys also made a little bit of history with being at the state fair and kind of building that out, which we will dive into. But tell us a little bit about Buddhist before we start, talking about everything else that you guys have been doing in the past year to help it grow and kind of build brand awareness around that. So you went from, let's take it a little bit back. So you've always loved cannabis. I think you said somewhere around high school was probably around the first time. I think typically that's most of us, maybe some a little bit earlier, just depends if they were like, second generation on the farms, and that makes more sense. But then you obviously went to college, and that may have been also part of your life, like you said. Tell us how that kind of sparked Buddhist for you. And was it something that you and Claudio, were just sitting there under the stars, maybe even had consumed cannabis? Or, a lot of people in our space are really into microdosing with psilocybin, even functional mushrooms. Tell us kind of how that was birthed.
Yeah. Well, the birthing of Budist, well, for those unfamiliar, Budist is really our industry's first dedicated rating and review platform for cannabis brands and products. So what we did is we assembled a team of critics that we refer to as Buddists. We created a 50-page editorial guideline where we're trying to standardize and professionalize the process of how you assess products and then how you talk about and translate that product to the consumer. We very much see ourselves as Sherpas that are helping new consumers understand these products and the nuances of all of these products. So it's less about us as connoisseurs that are kind of waxing on and waxing off about our own degrees of understanding and expertise about these products. It's more so, how do we help other people understand the nuances of these products? And so we did that by standardizing this process, by assembling a really diverse team of people that are diverse in demographics, that are diverse in the use cases and the reasons that they're consuming. And we brought everybody together and are really getting everyone on the same page for building what we call this culture of connoisseurship. And not that anything that we're doing hasn't necessarily existed before. People have been sharing reviews on products. They've been sharing their expertise, whether that's on publishers or platforms like Emerald Cup or High Times, or, just doing it through Instagram. But what we haven't had is really a dedicated place where people can go kind of share that expertise. And just like we see in other industries, right? In movies, you've got Rotten Tomatoes. In travel, you've got TripAdvisor. In restaurants, you've got Yelp. In wine, you've got Vivino, you've got Delectable. In beer, you've got Untapped. So every like analogous market where there's some aspect of whether it's connoisseurship or just knowledge of these products, there's a dedicated review platform that exists. In our industry, we just haven't had that yet. And so where this kind of stemmed from, and again, like we have Leafly and Weed Maps, but the difference with those platforms is that, we're using the 100-point system at Buddist, and we're following suit. A lot of our DNA, it really comes from an appreciation of how people celebrate wine. Like that's really where our DNA started. My partner, Claudio, his one of his like biggest passions is wine. We hang out with a lot of, being in the Bay Area, a lot of our best friends and closest friends are from the wine industry, and they're winemakers at, some of the most respected places around the valley here. And so just hanging out with a lot of that community as well, we just see how connoisseurship has developed. And following and studying the history of wine, there were a couple pivotal things that happened before consumers really started to appreciate and understand the differences in all of these products. And so we just saw that there was a need in the market for that. And then again, like a lot of things in life, they end up manifesting. And so this had really stemmed the idea while had existed. And I think many of our minds, meaning mine, Claudio's, and then our other business partners who we started this with, because it is a founding group of 5 of us. And then the team has since expanded. It really starts with that first appreciation of wine and understanding that journey and how consumers understand about these products. And I'll just give you a brief kind of history of this, which I think will make sense as to how we're looking at the big picture of cannabis and why we think that Budist is going to be a catalyst for really driving more consumer education. And the reason we believe this is because if you look at the history of wine, people have been consuming wine for hundreds of years. But it really wasn't until the late 1970s, 1980, when you had this passionate lawyer out of Philadelphia who starts documenting all of his tasting notes. This is Robert Parker. He comes up with a 100-point rating system as a way to really put this into a standardized way for consumers to understand the differences of these products. Before this, it was really that it was led by the industry. A lot of people within the industry would be talking about appellations and regions and terroirs and growing practices and what's different between this Pinot from this region versus this region. It was a lot of that connoisseurship existed within the wine industry, but it wasn't known to the masses. So it took individuals like Robert Parker creating the 100-point system, creating the Wine Advocate, which then became a quarterly subscription where people could read and all of the wines in his tasting notes from these different areas around the world. And then from there, what happened is then you had all these different critics that came into play. Then you have the sommelier program that really starts taking shape. And then after a few decades, you start to see consumers really having an appreciation for wine and understanding how to articulate it. And then there's a whole community that's built around it. In cannabis, we just haven't yet had that. And so seeing that history of wine and how that really developed, we just believe that it's going to take those critics, those voices, those publications that are dedicated to the products and helping consumers understand that. And it's that it's going to be that moment where we see that catalyst where then we're going to see a true culture of connoisseurship being developed that is understood by the masses.
Yeah, no, I think you broke that down very, very well. And, the way you explain that, I'm like, okay, is there a book going to come? Maybe an ebook? Because obviously data is being collected with what you guys are able to put out. That's an incredible journey, I'm sure, for what you guys have built out. But I love that you're referencing it to wine because I have said it before, especially when we're diving into terps and really understanding how that plays into certain palettes and understanding the blends of certain things. I think I've seen you at a couple events where you guys are pairing particular terps with particular food items. And I think that's the new thing right now, especially if we're, trying to get to the can curious and have their mind a little bit expanded on different ways of consuming it and being aware of different terps that are out there and not just the typical, ones that you see. That's what's always out there for maybe particular regions. As you said, it just all depends on where it's coming from. But I think this is going to be extremely helpful. And again, it all ties back to the importance of having passion for education in this space and something that can speak to, whether you're in this space or out of this space. But I think this is something that can reach all types of demographics and audience. So I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Well, and that's the goal really, because, I mentioned like that we have this team of critics, but the app isn't just about critics, that anyone can come into the app and rate and review a product. Like if you think about Rotten Tomatoes, we incorporate that dual score rating system. Again, we're using the 100-point system. So we're giving a framework for people to then think about and learn from our critics as to what are they writing about when they're writing a review of a product. That's very new for our community. And while people have been out there sharing their perspectives and opinions, it just there hasn't been a standardized way to go do that. And that's what we're trying to do, is really create a professional kind of forum to do that. But with that said, it doesn't mean that this isn't for everyone. Like any consumer can come into the app right now and also share their opinion. We just wanted to make sure that we properly set that foundation for how people should think about doing that. And so you'll see that's why we really jump-started the platform with this group of critics and this diverse set of voices, because we hope that whoever you are as a consumer, you can come into the app, find somebody that you resonate with, and then perhaps learn from them, start reading their reviews, and then hopefully that'll trigger, interest and passion. If you're passionate about this plant, then to go share your own reviews. And then you'll have some guide as to really how to think about doing that.
Yeah, and even how to shop, be a little bit more aware of when they're shopping, and how to assess whatever product that they're starting to consume, because maybe there's things that the critics putting out there that they're not aware of. And again, it's something that still has to be built out, because unless, there's there's a diverse demographic of people in our industry, and then there's people who just smoke weed. I don't know how else to explain it, but I have tons of family members that are like, they don't care what brand it is. They don't care, they don't follow the dispensary or any of the news or anything that our community is kind of building in the industry. And so to them, they're just like, they've just been smoking weed for a long time. And so I think the more education like this, as far as being able to assess the products that are being out there, not just flower, but even, the people who are willing to go for the rides on edibles and give a full review on that, and just able to, even highlight the brands that are reputable and somebody that you can trust, especially with today's riffraff that's going around as to what's safe out there, what's, being tested and, being handled correctly by the time it gets on shelf. And so I love everything that Budist is doing with this. I think there's so many different levels that can bring value to even, brands, and not just a consumer or a critic, I should say.
Yeah, definitely. I resonate a lot, the comment that you made about your family members just consuming and just kind of mindlessly, in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean, look, for me, I've been consuming pretty much daily for the past, 5 to 7 years at this point. And I've been a regular consumer since, 15. I've dabbled with it on and off. But it's interesting because even for me, having such a long time relationship with the plant, it really wasn't until going through the Gangier program that even I was becoming more conscious of my consumption and what I'm consuming. And that was because I had some knowledge and some framework, and it inspired and sparked this new passion in me, where I was assessing qualities of the product that I just hadn't been looking at before. So I was just really paying more attention to what I was consuming, how I was feeling, how it was responding with my body. And I just didn't really think about that as much before from that kind of perspective. And it just entirely like opened up my world. And I went through that program. Both Claudio and I went through it together at the same time that we were actually like developing the app, that our engineering team was working on it. And that was just such a great blessing, because it just gave us a whole new perspective as to really what we should be incorporating into the experience of the app, how we then want to assemble our team of people and train people in our way about assessing all the nuances of these products. And so it just truly opened my world. I can't say enough good things about the program. And just if you're passionate about the plant, to really learn that framework of how to assess, it just will open your world in terms of, like, I was smelling new smells for the first time and paying attention to things that I hadn't been paying attention to. Just
Right.
using all of your senses is really, I think that's like the start of this culture of connoisseurship, is really using all of them to assess products in this way.
I think you guys are on a great start. I can't wait to see where this goes. Tell us a little bit how that kind of became a conversation. I know you had said, this is kind of the background of it. Something that you and your partner decided to create together. I know you said you had 5 partners, and I know you guys are growing, because I'm seeing your team everywhere, which I want to dive into, because I love the other thing that I see on Instagram is that you guys like meet you guys are either meeting specifically for meetups to try something, or maybe that was just for the state fair. But I think that brings a lot of fun in the environment that you're trying to create with Buddhists. And when that is at the forefront of a CEO or founder, I think those brands really succeed. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, tell us how this was brought up.
Yeah. Well, the part that I haven't yet mentioned, I mentioned that a lot of our founding story stems from a passion and appreciation for wine connoisseurship and how that history developed. But the thing that I didn't mention is that one of our partners, he's an investor and a board member. He's one of the pioneers in wine. I mentioned Robert Parker, who created the 100 Point System and the Wine Advocate. our business partner, Antonio Galoni, is now recognized as one of the world's leading wine critics and really was one of those key voices in developing the wine connoisseurship within that industry. He runs a company called Venice Media, as well as an app called Delectable, which is essentially the analogous platform of Budist. So like I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. What we've created exists in other industries, and people are, rating and reviewing products. And in wine, again, they're doing it on the 100-point system. They have a home that they can go do that and a platform they can go do that. And so this all came together with really the knowledge and the expertise of our group of, 5 kind of co-founders who jump-started this platform. It's all individuals that are coming from analogous industries that have built a platform like this in their industry. So I share that because we're taking a lot of that expertise in how do you develop a market like this? How do you develop a culture of connoisseurship? And there's very much like a process and a framework to do that, because this is so new for our community, for our industry. You can't just build a platform and say, hey, let's go rate and review products. Like, this is so new for consumers. You really have to, and even for our own community, like people, a lot of our Buddists, there's 28 Buddists now, and they've all been doing this for, many of them for 10 plus years on their own accord on whatever platforms they can do that on that will allow them to do it. And so we're really bringing everybody together to, again, standardize this process and really build this like a foundation for a culture of connoisseurship. And again, not that this hasn't existed before, it just hasn't all been brought together really in one place with such intent, I think, as we're really trying to put forth here. And so I share the connection with wine because, again, like that's how it already is. They've already gone through that journey and that learning process. And it took, 3 decades for that to happen. So we're able to take a lot of those learnings, learn from, our business partner, Antonio, and understand, well, how did this develop in the wine industry? How do you get consumers to then understand the nuances of all these products and then share about it? Like, how did that all develop? So that was really critical, having that understanding in doing what we're doing. And then also just having that understanding as we developed the physical app, right? Because again, they've done this in the wine industry. So that was really important for our understanding.
Just wanted to remind everybody to make sure you guys subscribe, comment if you guys can relate to some of the things that we are sharing with you, whether that's tips or even the journey that we're going through in this space. So thank you again for everybody that has subscribed. Second to that was the wine having these, having the background of wine connoisseurs on the team. Are you guys already seeing, you guys through your guys' Buddhist event this year at Sunstone, I'm imagining there must be an overlap with maybe some of the wine connoisseurs or critics out there that are now looking at cannabis and seeing like how they can either, get into it or, be a critic for this space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, a lot of the events that we're doing, whether that was the event that we did at Sunstone or that's the Hash Flight event series that we're doing, or even the tastings where we got together to assess products for the state fair, we're really trying in the same way to create conversation where we're going through and we're, for example, for a lot of those, it's again, following suit of how people get together as a community and discuss and learn about wine. So you do that in a standardized way where we come together and we're tasting through 5 cultivars and we're learning about that brand. We're learning about their cultivation practices. We're learning about their terroir and their appellation. And when I say we are learning, our Buddists are educating at these events and treating it in a similar manner as you would a wine tasting, where someone, whether it's the sommelier or the person working at the winery, that's really explaining to the consumer, that attendee or that participant, as to all of the nuances of how that product was created and grown and what makes it unique. And then being able to calibrate off each other and everyone go through and say, oh, okay, well, what did you get from this cultivar? What are you picking up in the aroma? What are you picking up in terms of when you look at it? Do you see a lot of trichomes? How dense is it? Does it look like it was properly trimmed? Is it over trimmed? Is it not trimmed enough? Does it look like it was stored well? All of those things, to really have an understanding of that, it helps to calibrate off other people. Mm-hmm. I think, again, especially because this is so new and, being an Emerald Cup judge, when you're coming together, one of the most like impactful parts for our own individual learning, whether as a critic or just as someone in this industry who cares about the plant, we're learning from each other.
Yeah.
And you have to calibrate off one another. And this is in every industry, right? This is in wine, this is in beer, this is in music. People are sharing their ideas, they're sharing their reasons for what they believe about this product. And then you're learning from other people, and then you're calibrating off each other. And that's been a huge part of what we're doing. And when we say education, that's part of the educational experience, is creating opportunities for our community to do that. And I can say for me, going through the Gantier program, it wasn't just the learning of, it wasn't the educational learning that I think was really most impactful for me. It was that every Tuesday and Thursday for like a 6-month period, we would come together with anywhere from 30 to 50 other Gantiers. Everybody's on Zoom, and we would all be tasting through the same cultivar and then sharing our opinions and walking through like 50 different data points and saying like, okay, what are you getting from this? What are you getting from this? And that's the way that we could refine our palates. And then we would also, it would give us confidence. And I would be like, oh my gosh, okay, great. Like I was picking this up from this cultivar, and most of the other group felt the same way. And then that's how you really hone in your own expertise. So that's what we're trying to do with a lot of the events that we're doing. We're creating opportunities for our community of people that are passionate about these products to come together, to learn from our Buddists, to learn from the brand partners, to learn from other experts in the industry, and to create a forum and an atmosphere that we can all then safely kind of share and calibrate and just have a good time really getting into and nerding out, you know, about these products that we love so much.
Yeah,
So
no,
that's
I
the
think
ethos
that,
of it.
well, that's amazing. I think you guys are doing everything you can to really maximize and amplify, being a asset to our community, and also being kind of a trailblazer as to are kind of curious people in the audience that are still trying to understand this plant. Other than the typical medicinal part of, oh, this is, this can help people with PTSD, or this is good for depression and anxiety. I think it goes above and beyond that when you're really looking at this plant in the eyes of somebody that's passionate about it. And then that also can translate to people understanding it a little bit more and seeing a little bit of the difference in it, because, chefs like to use it for culinary purposes if they can understand using it, something like that. A lot of athletes are starting to talk about their relationship with cannabis and the different ways they like to consume it. And a lot of times, because they're athletes, they don't like to actually smoke. And so hearing their perspective is so interesting. And again, maybe they don't even know about some of the things that we can have access to, being Emerald Cup judge, or being a Buddhist, or, being in circles where you're able to reach and go to these farms and have access to these amazing crops. I think that's another thing that you guys probably have to hone in on, is really curating relationships in order for you guys to do what you guys do. Is that, or are they just sending it to you guys? I mean, you can tell me how that works, but I imagine collaboration is huge in our space, and that is such a big way to get light on their product. At the same time, give them some feedback on how to elevate their product, in the space.
100%. Exactly. Yeah. It's been interesting because, when we were in the idea phase of the app, because we've been building that, we just actually like publicly debuted the app in March, the week of Hall of Flowers, where we announced our partnership also with the state fair, and that our Buddists would be the judges for the cannabis competition this year. The app had been approved in December in both Apple and Google Play stores, and we started just building the foundation of it, getting the platform, the database built out with reviews and with products, beta testing the app and going through a lot of bug testing. So the app in itself has really, and when I say app, like Budist is more than just an app. It's a platform, it's a movement, it's a community of people that are sharing their passion around products and brands. That's like the core of what it is that we're trying to do. Now, the idea phase of the app had really started a year and a half prior to physically building it out. And so during that time, Claudio and I went around to the community, and we went to brands of all sizes, and we went and said, this is what we're going to build. And we went to get buy-in from people. And so we said, this is what we're going to build. We want to build this to help you so that you can connect directly with consumers, so that you can get feedback from consumers. And so that as together as an industry, this will be a catalyst point, just like all the history I was giving you in wine. We believe this will then be that catalyst point. So we went and we got buy-in from, I don't know, probably 200 different brands. And everyone across the board was just like, this is incredible. And so what happens is that the brand provides us the product. They get it to us in whatever way is compliant within how they run their business. They make sure that it's the most optimal sample that they want our Buddists to review. And then we then distribute that to our team of Buddists. We pay our Buddists for every product that they review. And then again, we've just standardized that process and training people as to how we want to then translate that to the consumer, and then how that should be translated for the brand. And the guidance that we give is that basically what we're assessing for is, did this product, did it achieve what the brand said that it was meant to be? So if the brand is saying, because this isn't, again, just about craft like connoisseur brands, this is, we want this to be for every brand. So there's a place in the market for value brands. As we know, 80% of the market is driven by value brands. People are purchasing on price point and THC levels at this point, or potency. So it's not to say that one particular segment of the community is more important than the other. There's a place for all of these brands. And what we want to do as Buddists is we want to then assess it based on the brand's intended use case. So if the brand is saying, I'm a value brand, this product is going to help you for sleep, the role of our Buddists and what we're training people to do is then assess it. Did that brand's commitment follow through? Did it help you with sleep? And was it a value product that met its commitment that they said they were going to make to the consumer? And so I think we were able to get a lot of buy-in from brands, because initially some brands were like, well, wait a minute, but we're using distillate. And we know that a lot of your Buddists don't appreciate distillate. So are they going to give me a bad score or a bad review? And it took some time to build trust and to help them understand that, no, they're here to help consumers understand, did your brand deliver on its intended use case? And so I think that gave the community a lot of confidence, knowing that we were going to really treat this with the utmost professionalism and being unbiased. And so that's how, before the app even launched in the app stores, we had buy-in from hundreds of brands across California, because we went to them before and got their feedback, their commitment to this. And I think that's why now, as we've, like, over the past couple months, as we've publicly debuted and then been a part of the state fair, I think that's why we're seeing the response that we're seeing, because we just had such a level of respect for them. And that's a big part of our ethos. You know, my partner Claudio was one of the co-founders of Guild Extract. So he's been in the industry for a really long time. He's created a connoisseur product that's kind of led in that particular, in concentrates. So we know how hard it is to build a brand, to drive awareness of that brand, especially a connoisseur brand. And so that's a big part of our ethos, is just helping these brands tell their stories with consumers that are looking for their products.
Yeah, no, that touches on so many different levels, as far as, just you guys specifically being a guide for many people in this space. For connoisseurs, you guys are kind of spearing the head on being educators. And at the same time, you guys are kind of taking everybody that supports that vision on the ride with you guys to equally give them the highlight or opportunity to be seen as well. And in today's world, specifically in the cannabis space, with all our censorship and shadow banning, marketing gets so hard. And I think this would be kind of a backdoor vibe for me, as far as if I owned a brand, on different, thinking outside of the box, as far as, how do I get eyes on my brand? How do I get people to see what we're about, what our product consists of? And I think your platform does that. And so congratulations to you guys. You guys are crushing it there. Was there any thought process as far as marketing when you guys built out Budist?
Oh, completely. I mean, that's one of, like, the 4 problems that we're trying to solve, because we're solving a lot of different problems for our industry, right? We're giving a platform for the critic to build their own personal brand and build their profile as somebody who's an expert, just like we see with wine critics. For the brand, we're building that platform for them, because we're like, I'm shadow banned on our Budist Instagram account is now shadow banned. So it's just, that's really hard for us as people that are passionate in this industry. And so that is one of the other reasons that we built the platform, was to solve that problem. From the marketing standpoint, another kind of, like, example that I'll give that I think will help connect the dots and make sense for the bigger picture and the impact is that, okay, like if you think about Yelp, and I know everybody has their own different opinions on Yelp, so I use this example and I kind of tread lightly with it. But look, Yelp started in 2004. And if you think about Yelp or the world of like foodies and the culture of foodie prior to 2004, that was largely driven by critics. And it was driven by critics for like Michelin and Zagat. And it was very small groups of kind of professional people whose opinions were really driving a lot of the foodie culture. Well, what Yelp did is it really then it created this culture of foodies that was then accessible to the everyday consumer, because then everybody's voice could be heard by having a platform that was really a meritocracy, a platform that allowed everybody to have a voice in that process. And that's what we're trying to do. While we're jumpstarting it with a lot of our critics, the goal is to bring in any everyday consumers and allow them to have a voice in this process. And that's what then catalyzed the culture of the foodie. Prior to that, that just really wasn't, it was driven largely by a select group of people. And so that's what we're trying to do here, is really make this so that that for cannabis as a whole, we're driving a culture of cannabis connoisseurship and appreciation. And if we, again, look at history of these other industries, whether it's the culture of foodies, whether it's even within music, all of those industries, having general consumers have a voice in that process, that's critical, because you don't want to give too much weight to any one individual voice. And so we want to empower everybody. And the way that we're going to do that in a very new industry that doesn't even yet really have an articulated or a vernacular for describing products, the only way we can do that is if we set a foundation and we get buy-in from a group of individuals who wants to go do that. And that's essentially what we did. And I think that's why a lot of our Buddists are so passionate about the opportunity, because they see that they can then be that voice. They can help lead that culture. And so this really is like a for the community, by the community venture. And I think that's, again, why we're just seeing the response that we're seeing, is because when we explain it to our team and get everybody on the same page, that that's what we're trying to do as a collective here, I think this has just been a missing spot in our industry that we're seeing a lot of people just get behind it because of that.
Yeah, I have to say, I think that was the first thing I commented. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a Yelp. So I totally can see where you guys are, filling the gaps and being the bridge for so many different things. And like you guys said, or like you said earlier, as far as being an educator, also building the culture around this is going to be huge for you guys. And so again, I'm excited for everything that you guys are doing. I know we're taking a lot of your time today, and we briefly kind of little bit tapping on the state fair, your involvement there. I didn't get to go this year. I thought it was very, very exciting for the cannabis space to be there, for people to walk, I believe, into an area where they were selling cannabis. They were able to consume cannabis. They were able to showcase everything that this industry has kind of put together and the science behind it. Tell us a little bit about how that went, and just your experience in building that out and seeing it come to light.
Yeah, we're like, I say we, I mean, not just like our team at Budist, but I just see so much enthusiasm still from the community, just like reeling from this opportunity, because in our industry, we just don't have a lot of opportunities where we can get outside of kind of our community and speak to new consumers. And so for the California State Fair, this has been going on it's in its 170th year. Wow. And over 700,000 people come through the state fair over this 2-week period. And the California State Fair, and like every state fair, they're really celebrating the agricultural excellence. They're selling the technology excellence of that state. And so for California, there's a wine competition that's a part of the state fair, olive oil and beer and cheese. Yep. And it's this like platform where you have, people that are then celebrating these goods. So cannabis began included 2 years ago. This is the third year that it's been included, but they were only testing it was only flower that was included as part of the competition. And it was all done through analytical testing. Whereas if you look at, the wine competition or the beer competition, that's done through a panel of judges that are assessing and selecting the winners of those competitions. And so the reason, like on our end at Budist, that we were just so not only grateful for the opportunity for us as a company, but just for our industry, is because that now puts cannabis on par with these other agricultural goods.
Yeah.
And it puts it on par because we're also using this panel of judges that are really sharing the expertise and giving their voice to it and then sharing about it within their communities. And so it was just a massive, like, historic opportunity for our industry. But then aside from that, then the fact that California allowed on-site sales and consumption, I mean, that's what's really historic here. And we think going to be, again, like a catalyst moment for our industry, where we're going to start to see other states will follow suit. And some of the data that's now coming out is there was, I believe, a 10% increase in spends at the state fair. And so they're connecting some of that back to cannabis and just being and driving new consumers in. And, you know, the CEO, Tom Martinez, I think he was saying one of the incredible things about the state fair this year and the cannabis portion of it is that a good majority of the individuals that were coming through were senior citizens. And so it's like a lot of new consumers that really hadn't had access or had been, you know, had that connection point to cannabis. It's things like this, it's events like this that are really going to help normalize it even more. And all of the press that we're getting, I mean, we've been in Forbes and on ABC News and Adweek. So it just really takes our community outside of kind of sometimes what feels like a very insular little bubble and gives us a much larger platform and stage. And so it just benefits our entire community and industry. And just California, we're just innovators and pioneers here. And I'm so proud to just be living in this state and a part of this historic moment, because I know that it's going to be not too long from now that we're going to see other states following suit.
Yep, I can sense it. I can feel it, you know, and especially after seeing the success of the state fair, and shout out to Embark. I know they were a big part of that. And Dustin and Lauren has really worked hard in that. And so to see the collaboration there was really exciting. I know Tim and Taylor Blake, founders of Emerald Cup, were also there. And I just, you know, love seeing these leaders and experts really come together to support one another in whatever venture they're doing. And I think it speaks to our culture and our community. So I love seeing that. But congratulations to everything that you and Claudio have built out, and the entire Budist team. As you said, it's also a team. And I think that is huge as well when you're recognizing the people behind it. But I see you're doing your thing as a woman in this space. And I think that's very inspiring and empowering to many of us, even if we don't know you personally. So kudos to everything that you're doing. Before we let you go, we do have a short rapid fire. And if you would just go ahead and put in your plug before we let you go. At 7 grams, what's your favorite way to consume cannabis?
A joint, hands down.
Have you ever grown your own weed?
No.
Have you ever sold weed?
No.
Dispo or plug?
Plug.
All right. What's your favorite cannabis news or media brand?
Wow, that one shouldn't be that hard. I read MJ Biz Daily. I read Green Market Report. I read Benzinga. I read a lot of the business pubs is primarily. And then honestly, I read pretty much every review. So I'm going to say it's our own. Like if I'm trying to get product knowledge, and it's Budist and it's our app. Otherwise, I follow a lot of the markets and just what's going on industry wide.
Okay, that's fair. What's the one cannabis annual event you look forward to each year, and which one is a non-negotiable?
Emerald Cup, no doubt. That's, you know, absolutely Emerald Cup, hands down. And then also Hall of Flowers. That's always such a great event. But those two certainly are top of mind for me.
Great choices. And last but not least, what is your favorite stoner movie?
Favorite stoner movie? I would say Pineapple Express is kind of the first thing that comes to mind. But
that's a good one.
Yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind.
Yep, I'm on the
Yeah,
same
agree with
page.
that.
If I think about it, I'm like, "Oh, I really gotta think about it." It used to be like Cheech and Chong or Half-Baked, and some people didn't even know what Half-Baked was, and so I was like, "Let's just keep it pretty general to a stoner movie." Well, that's all I've got for my 7 grams at rapid fire. I really appreciate you sharing everything that you shared today about your journey with cannabis and in this space and what you guys have built out with Buddhists. Remind everybody where we can find you and connect with you.
Yes. Our website is going to be one of the best ways to get all the information about what we're doing, budist.com. And please download the app, check it out, engage with it, create a profile, connect with other individuals in our community. It's available on Apple and Google. And feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn or on Instagram, Jossie Bossy. And yeah, would love to hear from you and just build and collaborate however we may be able to.
Awesome. I appreciate you again. That's all we have for today. If you guys have any questions, any comments, anything that you guys resonated with everything that Jocelyn has shared, please make sure you guys drop it in our comments. And don't forget to share the show to help us grow. I'm out. Peace.